One. Hey, assalamu alaikum everyone. Hi everyone. Just can I ask, we're going to be starting in 10 minutes. Can I just ask you, if you can, try not to leave spaces in between yourselves, just because it's quite hard for people then to come in. So if you can try and, there's lots of space behind there. If you can try and get into one of those spaces, that would be great. Thank you very much. We'll be starting at 7:30 on the dot. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for joining today. We are going to start the program with, as we always do, with a recitation of the Holy Qur'an. Let's welcome Maryam and Ahmad with Salawat ala Muhammad wa al Muhammad. Please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون وأوفوا بعهد الله إذا عاهدتم ولا تنقضوا الأيمان بعد توكيدها وقد جعلتم الله عليكم كفيلا إن الله يعلم ما تفعلون.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما فلا تتبعوا الهوى أن تعدلوا وإن تلوا أو تعرضوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإن طائفتان من المؤمنين اقتتلوا فأصلحوا بينهما فإن بغت إحداهما على الأخرى فقاتلوا التي تبغي حتى تفيء إلى أمر الله فإن فاءت فأصلحوا بينهما بالعدل وأقسطوا إن الله يحب المقسطين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولمن انتصر بعد ظلمه فأولئك ما عليهم من سبيل إنما السبيل على الذين يظلمون الناس ويبغون في الأرض بغير الحق فأولئك لهم عذاب أليم. صدق الله العظيم.
Thank you very much for that amazing recitation. As you will have seen, the verses chosen reflect three topics that we're going to be covering today. Firstly, the economy on justice. The second about racism and hate crime as well as security. And finally, foreign policy and oppression. Firstly, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to have so many of you joining in our center here in Merali. We are very fortunate to have been doing these types of events for many years. Since I think the early 2000s, we have had events such as these and hustings for all the various parliamentary candidates, but that's not all we do. So I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking about what we do at the centre. We invite literally hundreds of different individuals throughout the year to come and speak and share their perspectives. And that happens every year throughout the year. Here is an example of just in the last year, 60 or 70 people who we invited to speak. They come from different perspectives, different ideas. This coming week, we also have our core programs, which are for our community, for the Shiite Nashri community here in Middlesex, where we talk about the Arafah, and here Al-Adha, which is coming up in the coming week. So inshallah, hopefully you'll be able to join for those who participate in our programs. Every week, we have commentary of the Qur'an, which is the weekly tafsir classes, and there are regular activities span throughout the week. From Monday, when we have mums and tots and ladies Pilates, Tuesday when we have yoga, Wednesday we have other things which have decided to move on to the next screen, so I can't tell you what they are. But what you will see on the SICM.org.uk website is a range of different things that we do, as you can see through the posters which are passing by. And it's great to try and ensure that this centre, which as you can see in front of you is packed today and is packed throughout the year, is going to be only one part of our journey. As you can see behind me and as you can see on the street, we are building something called the Salam Centre. This is a venue that you can see and there's leaflets on everyone's chairs, and that talks to the community we are trying to build here. One that is confident in our identity as Muslims in this society, but opening and welcoming to all, because that's what we care about in our society. So please feel free to donate. If you'd like to find out more about the centre, the various facilities it has, from a sports hall to a lecture theatre, to a IT room, to a lecture, to games rooms, a youth centre, to gyms, you'll be able to see that. And finally, just a note about our upcoming lectures, which are over the next few weeks. You'll get a chance to see them on over here. These are some of these are our lecturers at the moment every Friday evening. So thank you very much for listening to me and giving me the chance to give you a brief overview. We all know that we have the elections coming up in 4 weeks' time. And it's important that we have the opportunity to hold our candidates to account. And that's why we have these hustings. And we do have the incumbent individual who was the MP and now no longer, for at least for the next few weeks. The local MP, Gareth Thomas, who will be joining us online. We have the representative of the party of government, Abbas Morali, who will be speaking to us as the Conservative parliamentary candidate. And we'll also have the independent candidate, Pamela, who will be speaking from that perspective. Now, you will note that we will try and we'll have questions that will keep everyone to account. I'm going to be asking one question to each of the candidates on each of the three topics, starting with the economy, then moving economy and public services, then moving on to security and hate crime, then moving on to foreign policy. I will ask one question, and then after I've asked one question to each of the candidates, I will then invite questions from the floor. We've obviously chosen 3 candidates. We haven't chosen all the candidates. And that's because we want to make sure that with 3, we can have enough time for everybody to speak. And we think that the independent candidate has a good chance here of potentially becoming third, but most importantly, holds interests amongst many in the community. We want to make sure there's a wide range of views amongst the 3 people who are here. And all 3 of you, Gareth, Abbas, and Pamela, have all engaged with us over the last few months and years, and it's real pleasure that you're able to keep on engaging with us in the past and right now. And that's why it's really important. However, there are candidates who are not on the panel who will be part of this election. And we can't accommodate everyone, but we do want to ensure that we're highlighting that there are other candidates. Those include Chris Noyce from the Liberal Democrats, as well as the Green Party, I think Rupert George, and Reform Party. Please be aware that there are other candidates here, and as you'd expect us to do, we want to make sure we're objective in everything we're doing. As a centre, we do not support any party. We are here to hold everyone to account. we will have opening remarks from each of the speakers, but what I'm going to say is that when I do ask the audience participation, please can everyone keep their comments short. There are a lot of people here, and if I were to give everyone the same, a large amount of time, we would not be able to get through to everyone. So please forgive me in advance if I have to cut you off, but please do listen if I do cut you off. And I would ask you to obviously maintain decorum. Please make sure that you ask as hold your representatives to account in a way that is fair, and please feel free to hold your candidates to account, because that's what we're looking for. And so, yeah, we're expecting some strong views, but please do listen. And I've been told to highlight the fact we do have security in place, some strong people with their nice blue jackets there. How strong they are, we will see. So please do note that we do have that security in place, and they will, if required, act. But we hope that's not the case. So without further ado, please can I welcome to the stage and online, Gareth Thomas online, Abbas Morali and Pamela, to be able to start our hustings for this event. Brilliant. So we're going to start with 2 to 3 minutes each in terms of an opening statement, up to 3 minutes. I am counting, but please try and keep it to 3 minutes, and we will then start with the first area. So let's start with the representative candidate for the Labour Party, Gareth Thomas.
Thanks very much, Miqdad, for your introduction, and good evening, everybody. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person. I should explain that for more than 18 months now, I've been given very clear advice not to advertise in advance where I'm going to be. So I'm grateful to Miqdad and the other organisers of tonight's hustings for being willing to accommodate me online. Let me be clear where I stand. I believe that this election is hugely important for our country. I think it offers the country a clear choice and a clear change in direction. On July the 5th, we will either wake up with another 5 years of Rishi Sunak's government, of Bob Blackman and Liz Truss and other Conservatives in government, or we'll have a new Labour government committed to changing our country, to sorting out the problems in the NHS, in our schools, and to delivering economic stability. And the Conservatives, we all know, have failed us terribly over the last 14 years here in Harrow and across the rest of the country. Living standards have fallen. Ambulances are not turning up when they should. Schools are crumbling around our children. Sewage is pouring into our rivers. Crime and antisocial behaviour are not being dealt with. And mortgages and food prices have gone through the roof. So there is a clear chance on June the 5th, if people decide to vote Labour, that we can end 14 years of Conservatives and have a new government in place. Here in Harrow West, there is a clear choice between someone who lives in the local community, who's the Labour candidate, myself, or a Conservative candidate. It's a straight fight between Labour and the Conservatives in this seat. I've lived in this community all my life. I went to school at North Pinner Park School, just up the road from the centre that you are all in at the moment, then on to Hatch End High, and still live locally with my family. I believe that a Labour government always makes a difference, a positive difference for people. I can remember having walk-in centres locally, where everybody could walk in off the street and see a GP or a nurse when they needed to. We had police teams in every ward of Harrow, and crime was dealt with when it needed to be. And schools were actually being invested in. Whitmore High School, very near to where you all are, completely rebuilt under a Labour government. So I hope you'll take the decision on July the 4th to make a positive choice and to vote Labour to end Rishi Sunak's time in government, to bring an end to 14 years of the Conservatives, and to begin to chart a new positive direction for our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gareth, for joining and giving your opening statement. We'd now like to move to Abbas Morali, who'll give his opening statement.
Thanks, Miqdad, and thanks for having me. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, my eldest brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. It always gives me great pleasure to come to SICM. This is the place my dad and my mum used to bring me every other Friday, because the other Friday we used to go to Stanmore 30 years ago when I first arrived from Kenya. And this is the second time. The last time I came here, I was told, you're really brave to come to Mahfil. Well, I've come back, so it can't have been that bad. What is really pleasing is to see the Miqdad made reference to the Salam Center. My family and I have been very supportive of the center right from the inception, from the beginning, and to see the vision come true and the iconic building now taking shape. Inshallah, we'll see fruition very soon. But I remember I am the person who, when I chaired SGRS, I was the one who fought hard to have the Salam Center banner on the shirts. I'm the person on the doorsteps day in, day out promoting Salam Center and the vision that Miqdad articulated about the inclusivity community center to some of the critics next door. As you all know, I went to school in Harrow. My family bought a care home in Harrow back in 1992. Which is still there, employing local people and looking after local people. My journey took me to London School of Economics to do economics career in the city, and then 10 years ago I came to join my brother to lead the care business, and very much in Harrow. I am a community man. I've done community work within our communities through and through for years, and it is through that community work that I have had the inspiration to do community work in the wider public service. And I'm a big believer in greater representation across the political divide in both local government and national government. Now, I know a topic that is going to be very much at the top of everyone's mind, and it is in top of my mind, is Gaza. What's happened there has hurt me and pains me as it pains all of you here today. On that, I have, just for the record, I organized the first of my several parliamentary roundtables on the subject back in the end of October last year. That is 3 weeks after the horrific events of the 7th of October. I put my first public statement out on the 15th of November, which is still available on my social media. I have since called for a immediate and permanent ceasefire before your current or your previous Labour MP did. And I have been a strong advocate on the subject throughout. On Islamophobia, again, I have condemned some of the senior party ministers publicly for Islamophobic tropes. I have led, locally in terms of my speeches on Islamophobia in my council meeting, and on other values that are very important to us and this community's family values. And I've been lobbying extensively for months now, or even longer than that, on banning gender identity education and more appropriate sex education for our children in schools. And you'll be pleased the Prime Minister only 2-3 weeks ago announced, not suggesting that was because of my lobbying, but announced that the change in the proposals on education. So coming to local issues now, whatever Gareth mentioned, there's absolutely no doubt across the borough that the Conservative-run council is doing a far better job than the previous failed Labour administration. This gives me a unique opportunity with my relationship with the Conservative Council to deliver for our communities, and I already started doing that. I'm working on a Muslim cemetery project where we have identified now 3 clear sites. There's another meeting in 2 weeks' time. So I'm spearheading that project, and I will deliver a Muslim cemetery locally. I've resolved parking issues for Tarawih Namaz in Ramzan for a Harrow Mosque, and I'm working on a permanent solution, and I'm working for the Somali and Sri Lankan Muslim community. And Miqdad, I'm about to finish, so thank you for that time. I will say there's only one thing that I did agree with Gareth in his introduction, and that was the fact that the choice upon you on the 5th of July is very clear. You either have the same MP that you had for the last 27 years, who's taken your support year in, year out for granted, isn't even here today, or you have me, a strong voice who understands community needs, who will stand up for you, and who will be a strong advocate both nationally and locally. The choice is clear. The choice is yours.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Abbas. Can we go to Pamela, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Excuse my voice, it's been going for some time, so just bear with me croaking. It's so good to see so many friends here and also people that are recognised from the local marches, ceasefire marches, and also the national ones. It's been such a wonderful kind of experience getting to know so many people. So, first of all, I do have to say, you don't have to have just the Tories or Labour. You really don't. Of course they would say that. You have a choice, you've just got to vote. That's all you've got to do. Now, I know a lot of you here very well, but some of you may not know me, so I think I probably should tell you a little bit about me. It's a little bit like a CV, so I'm sorry if it's a bit boring, but it's just to give you some idea about who you might be trusting to get things done in your community. So I live and I work in Harrow West, and my children attended local schools. One of my sons is here tonight. They're grown up now, sadly. You miss it. It goes too fast, doesn't it? I'm very involved in the local community, both through my paid work and also other voluntary things that I've been involved in over the years to try to make things better for everybody in Harrow, not just myself. I've spent most of my working life helping people to access justice. I've worked for various charities, and these include Citizens Advice at the National Office, Family Rights Group that works with children being taken into care, and Child Poverty Action Group, as the name suggests, looking at child poverty. I'm the co-author of numerous books on social security law and EU law, and on poverty, and I was a visiting lecturer at King's College and what was the University of North London. I was a member of the Social Security Advisory Committee, which advises Parliament on social security legislation. So I know when politicians are saying things that are not true. They do it a lot. I also work closely with the European Commission on EU social security law. I was a local councillor in Harrow West for 8 years. I was for some time chair of the Planning Committee, a really big issue in Harrow at the moment, planning and the tall towers. And for most of the time I was in a councillor as chair of the Labour group. I stood as a parliamentary candidate in Harrow East in 2019, and I recognise some faces of people who came to help me then. So it's great to see you again. But I've also undertaken many voluntary roles in the communities. My family would sometimes say too many, because I take on too much. But I'm currently a trustee of a local charity, Nomad, which was set up by 3 young Somali women and does fantastic work. I'm the treasurer of Harrow Trades Union Council. I'm a proud trade unionist and have been one since the age of, I think, 19, which was a long time ago. I am the chair of my Unite branch, which represents people in the voluntary sector in London and the South East. And I was in the past a chair of governors of a local school, a trustee of the Women's Budget Group, and a trustee of Harrow's Women's Centre. I'll just really quickly finish. I founded Harrow Law Centre, which opened its doors in April 2010, and after my children, it's the thing I'm most proud of. It provides legal advice and representation to people on things like housing, welfare benefits, immigration. And it's because of that that I see the problems that are in Harrow and the absolute failure of our politicians to deal with that. And that is Labour and Conservative. The 14 years have been dire, and we'll look at that in a moment, but they were dire when the Tories took over. And people were telling me in 2010, you can't set up a law centre in this climate. There's such poverty and cuts to local authorities. But I did, and I delivered, and I will deliver to you as your MP.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, Pamela. What I'd like to do is, what we're going to do is, you'll see on the screen, if you go to slido.com, slido.com, and you put 1948985, you can put your messages up there. The candidates will be able to see them. Gareth, if you're able to join, slido.com, 1948985, and you'll be able to see what's going on. So you can use your phones to put some comments on if you'd like the candidates to see what they're saying. As I said, we're going to start with the economy. I'm going to ask some questions, and then I'll get views from the audience straight after. And we'll always, and as always, not for any other reason, just because of incumbency and because on the screen. I'm starting with Gareth, and I'll move across, and then happy to change the order if needed. So we'll start off, Gareth, with yourself on the economy. Keir Starmer, in his pledges to be the leader of the party, stated he would increase income tax on the top 5% of earners, and he would reverse the Conservative Party cut on corporation tax. Why did he promise that then and not follow through? And so can we trust the Labour Party are going to be better than the Conservative Party on social justice, on these issues to do with differences in and inequality, or are we going to see more austerity and more challenges? Gareth. Gareth, you're on mute. Gareth, you're on mute. Sorry.
Apologies. Thanks, Migdad, for the opening question. We're certainly not going to see more austerity, not least because we're seeing far too many families in Harrow and across the country suffering enormously now. The economic situation facing our country has markedly deteriorated since 2019, when Keir Starmer stood to be leader of the Labour Party. We're heading for having the highest level of taxation that we've ever had in this country, which is one of the reasons, along with the higher bills that people are having to pay, the higher prices that people are having to endure, the cost of living crisis playing out in front of our eyes in Harrow's food banks, and in my surgery, too many people clearly suffering. So we made very clear that we will not put up income tax, we will not put up national insurance, and we won't put up VAT. And we have set out clear first steps that we would seek to do to improve our public services, using, for example, the money from ending the tax breaks that private schools get, introducing VAT on private school fees, to pay for more investment in our schools, an extra 6,500 specialist teachers across the country, investment in mental health for our young people, investment in a free breakfast club for every primary school. So that's one example of the targeted promises we'll make. We've also said we want to invest in the National Health Service, but what we're certainly not going to have is a return to the economic instability, to the economic chaos that Liz Truss introduced and which Rishi Sunak supported, and which we're still suffering from far too much in our country at the moment.
Thank you, Gareth, and thank you for sticking to your time. Can I just press you on that, on the specific question on Keir Starmer? In his pledges to be leader of the party, he stated he would increase income tax on the top 5% of earners and reverse the Conservative Party cut on corporation tax. Do you know why the Labour Party, why did he promise that then and then not follow through?
Well, as I've indicated, the economy has notably worsened, and the economic situation facing people across the country has noticeably worsened. Cost of living crisis is worse now than when Keir Starmer took over as Labour leader, and our policies have to reflect that. I think, given that we're heading to, for our country, having the highest level of taxation for more than 70 years, given that people in Harrow, for example, are having to pay a higher council tax and are set to have to pay council tax increases of 16% over the next 3 years, we do have to be realistic about what people can afford to pay. So that's why we're only making clear, costed first steps in this at this time. We'll publish a manifesto in full, I believe, in the middle of next week. But given the economic crisis we're in, our policies have to reflect that, and that's why I say again, it is a clear choice on July the 4th between a Conservative government, and Abbas wants to see re-elected, or a Labour government offering a very different path, offering economic stability, offering the chance to get those bills and those food prices down and to begin to tackle the cost of living crisis.
Thank you very much, Gareth. So
to continue basically what Gareth said, he highlighted Liz Truss, and your party under Liz Truss tanked the economy in the infamous 2022 mini budget. Her plan for £45 billion of unfunded tax cuts led to economic panic, caused chaos on the financial markets. Why should anyone trust the Conservative Party when it comes to the economy?
Sure. I think when we talk about the economy, the first thing to put into context is in the last few years, Gareth mentioned 2019, since then we've been through some seismic events. The pandemic, once in a century event, the Ukraine war, and now the Middle East war. These things are significant events. If anyone looked at a newspaper 4 years ago from exactly today, we were talking about a 20-year recession. I remember clearly as we come out of the lockdown in 2020. So I'm just saying that as context. From what Liz thing, now the Liz budget was clearly a misjudged budget and clearly wrong. But to blame the high inflation on that is unfair, because the underlying factors were very much in the economy at that time to create some of the outcomes which have been blamed on her. They're not. But that's by the way, because the current Prime Minister has come in and with a clear plan to bring about stability, and he has delivered that clear plan on stability. Today, inflation has come right down to 2.3%. Wages are growing faster than inflation. We've got the lowest unemployment here in my lifetime, and we got tax cuts that have already been made, 4% on the national insurance, with the pledge to completely eradicate the double taxation on workers in national insurance. And we've also got the fastest growing economy in the G7 based on the latest numbers. So it's a hell of a rebound in a short period. The plan is working. We've got a lot of stability. This is not time to change. You've got to trust the current plan that our Prime Minister has implemented.
So Abbas, thank you for that. What was mentioned earlier was also that we are currently expecting austerity in the next few years. All of the independent forecasts about the economy suggests that there's a big gap that needs to be filled, and it looks like the Conservative Party is going to be cutting services to tackle that gap. Do you believe that there's going to be another level of austerity like we've had previously under the Conservative Party, which many people would argue decimated the country? What do you think is the way forward on that?
Yeah, so let me just tackle the first austerity that you mentioned, which happened after 2010. We all know the famous note that was left in the Treasury in 2010. You have no money. So there was a complete bankrupt government that was handed over to the.
Is that similar to now?
No, it's not. Far from it. Completely different, Miqdad. I've just gone through the record that we are in a completely different situation in 2024 to the one we were in 2010. We got a rebounding economy. We got interest rates about to come down. We got further tax cuts pledged. We got inflation under control, and we got a working economy and significant investment that has been pledged to improve productivity. Productivity results in greater GDP, results in greater tax revenue coming through, results in ability to continue with the public services where it's needed. So it's the right public services that's important rather than any public services.
Thank you very much, and I will get some time for the audience in a second. Pamela, many people may not know your views on the economy. It's harder for us to hold you to the same level of account because you're not in government or the local MP or the opposition. So can you share your views on the upcoming likely austerity? What would you do to tackle the huge debt that we're facing, the situation where you have large amounts of inequality in this country? What would you do about that?
Yeah, whenever I hear either Tories or Labour talk about the economy now, it reminds me of my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law was an economist, a great economist actually. He's dead now. But what he used to do was whenever he heard Thatcher talking about the household budget, the purse, we can't spend beyond our means, he used to scream at the radio saying, this is economic illiteracy, and this is what we have now. The finances of the government are not the same as a household budget. Yeah, we get Keir Starmer saying we've maxed out the credit card. It's not true. If you think about all parties, the two major parties of which they say you only have a choice, are both offering more austerity. But austerity has not worked. It has brought us to our knees. So we need investment. We need to think about where is all the money going? We have got rid of all the things that we produce, all our services. We need a massive programme of nationalisation. But what we have is that there is the public sector propping up the private sector. And so therefore, we have we know there's always money for war, isn't there? There's never money for social services. There's never money for hospitals. There is always money for war. So please don't believe these politicians, and particularly if you think about the money that was given to the mates of the Tories during COVID. Absolutely disgraceful. So therefore, my suggestion, and I can tell you from my work at the Law Centre, we cannot survive another 5 years of austerity, whether it's imposed by Labour or Conservative. We have to reject it. Of course, these two are aligning to tell you there is no other choice, because it's a nice, cosy arrangement, isn't it? But we do have a choice, and we can demand change. And we've seen how the public can rise up and demand change. Over Gaza, how we've come together, people from all communities. You know, if Gaza, it's not just a Muslim issue. We go on our marches. There are people of all faiths and none, all ages, all colours, all everything. And we can do the same on the economy. We don't have to accept it.
So, in particular, do you have a view on what specific areas you'd want to raise taxation on, and where you'd want to potentially raise extra revenue, and where you wouldn't, or where you'd like the debt to go up?
Well, the thing is, we are wasting so much money. If you talk about the NHS, Keir Starmer last night was saying, I forced myself to watch it. I had to, obviously, I was coming here tonight. And it was grim, wasn't it? It was pretty grim watching the two of them. Keir Starmer was asked, would you use the private sector, the NHS? And he said, no, proudly. But the NHS has been privatised. So many of the services are provided by private providers. So we, the public, are paying our taxes to give people lots of money in the private sector. If we take care homes, and I noticed, Abbas said he ran a care home. It's the biggest scam of all things. How many of us are caring for elderly relatives? I grew up in Harrow. I did leave, but I came back 24 years ago to look after my mum, who'd lived here a long time. I didn't know at the time she had dementia. And the services then, 15 years ago, before the Tories, were dire. I couldn't get the help she needed. I was on my knees with 2 young children trying to care for my mum as well. How many of you are in that situation? I bet a lot of you. Yeah. And yet, instead of local authority services, we're paying private sector thousands of pounds a week. I agree with raising taxes for services, but it's probably not as much as people imagine. So if we get the services that are not for profit, if we have a society based on the needs of the people rather than the greed of a few, we can actually have a much better functioning society. We scaremonger with tax rises.
Thank you very much. Okay, there have been some really interesting questions on Slido, so please do join if you'd like to. I will read a couple of those out. What we're going to try and do right now is get a wide cross-section of views from different elements of the audience. Not all questions will be able to answer, but please keep it short, otherwise we won't be able to get as many of you forward. So please put your hand up, and I'm happy to engage with anyone who wants to talk about the economy. Know that if I ask you a question here, you probably won't be able to ask a question later. We've got 3 topics: economy right now, security and hate crimes second, and foreign policy third. So starting on economy, any questions? Right here in the front. If someone can just bring a mic to the individual, please. Yeah, mic number 2, please. Go ahead. Okay, if you can just push the button, that's fine. Perfect.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question I've already put on the Slido, but basically, both the major parties are saying that growth is the answer. We are if you say just 3% growth, that's a good rate to aim for. You say that grows the economy, fine. But in 20 years, you've doubled the size of the economy, you've doubled the size of all the energy, all the consumption that we're doing. This is a finite planet. We're already burning it to cinders. You can't be doing this. We've got to work better. We've got to share. So what is your answer, each of you, to the problem?
Thank you very much. Let's get 2 more views from the audience, and then we'll ask the Questions? Yeah, please at the front here, and then we'll come to him. There we go. Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to address Abbas's point about real wage growth. You're very selective in your data, Abbas. Over the past 14 years, real wage growth has stagnated. In fact, it's been 0%. Over the same period, dividends, that means profits, have gone up 132%. So don't tell me that there isn't the money. There is the money. It's just going to the top 1%. Everybody else is suffering. By that, I don't just mean the working class. I mean the professional middle classes, the chartered accountants, the trainee solicitors, the chartered surveyors, the architects. Everybody, I work in the city. I know the 1%. Everybody, other than the top 1%, is having a very tough time.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And just here on the... Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi. So Abbas, you mentioned that we've seen growth under the Conservatives, but ultimately everyone in the world experienced COVID and is experiencing the war in Ukraine, and yet the UK has lagged behind all the other economies in Europe. And even at one point, Russia was performing better than us economically. So it doesn't really make sense to point to that. And I also think that from both parties, it's quite disingenuous that the elephant in the room isn't being mentioned, which is Brexit. And Brexit has happened, it's been voted for, but ultimately it's been absolutely botched. And our services have been crippled, and our freedoms have been limited, and no one's talking about it, and it's absolutely frustrating.
Thank you very much. I'm going to read a couple of the other comments from here, and then I'm going to get the candidates to respond. So, experts say that the single action that would improve child poverty in this country would be to remove the two-child benefit cap. Why won't Starmer and the Labour Party support this? Another question here is, let's try and avoid, yeah, here we go. What do you propose to do about the homeless issue that's on the rise in Harrow? And finally, the Conservative Party government has wasted up to £8 billion on overpriced, unsuitable and unused PPE. What's your view on that? And the Conservative Party love quoting the note that there's no money left, but they've left not great roads, schools, housing and hospitals. Maybe they should have spent money in the right place. So let's start with Gareth and your perspectives on any of the issues, whether it's to do with growth, whether it's to do with Brexit, child poverty, which have come to you. Gareth, please go ahead. A couple of minutes, please.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the questions. Just on the first question about growth, because what we have said is that we do want to see more economic growth. We do think that's essential. But we want to see, in particular, growth and investment in new renewable technologies such as wind power and solar power, and that we're determined to use revenues from a windfall tax on the oil and gas giants to set up Great British Energy to invest in solar power and to invest in wind power. And we believe that over time that will help to bring fuel bills down and make a real difference to the cost of living crisis that people are facing at the moment. On Brexit, it's absolutely true that the very poor deal that Boris Johnson negotiated with the European Union has pushed trade barriers up, pushed up the prices of food that we're importing into our country from Europe. And we need to tackle that. It's why Labour has said that we will negotiate a veterinary agreement with the European Union, that we see economic security being delivered partly through a closer relationship with the European Union. There's due to be a formal review of the trade deal that was negotiated with Europe next year, and we want to use that opportunity to bring down many of the barriers to trade that have caused so many difficulties for our economy going forward. Just lastly, the point on homelessness in Harrow. I'm struck by the number of people that we're seeing in homelessness and the rise in demand for great services that are provided in Harrow to tackle some of the homelessness issues. Harrow Council has no plans to build any new council housing and is even planning on its former Civic Centre site now to reduce the amount of affordable housing to just 5%. That's affordable housing which many people in Harrow simply couldn't afford anyway. We need a new programme of genuinely affordable housing, and we need the current Conservative administration in Harrow to commit to finding sites for new council housing to help the people who live in Harrow now find homes here in the borough too.
Thank you, Gareth. Just one point that you didn't touch on, which I think I just want to raise, is the single action that would improve child poverty in this country would be to remove the two-child benefit cap. Keir Starmer and the Labour Party so far have not promised to do that. In fact, seem to have done the opposite. Do you have a view as to whether that is the right thing to do, and would you support such a view?
Well, I hope that we will be able to look at that when we get into government, but we're not committing to do that at the moment. We are going to publish our manifesto next week, which will look at the issues around child poverty, as well as a whole range of other issues too. What we have specifically said, though, is that we do want to see every school in England having a free breakfast club, to help in a very direct way to tackle some of the consequences of the increase in poverty that we've seen in our country. Because I know as a former teacher and as a parent, that if children are hungry, they simply can't learn effectively. So that is one very direct way that we can use some of the money from putting up VAT on private school fees, alongside recruiting more specialist teachers, to tackle the consequences of the rise in child poverty that we've seen so far.
Thank you, Gareth. Abbas, would you like to touch on any of the questions raised so far?
Yeah, no, I'll go through. I think there was two or three points. But before I do that, firstly, thanks for all the questions. Can I just come back on Pamela's comment about the care homes? I mean, I'm not going to sit here, my dad, my brother, and a number of other care operators here being called scammers, because we've been working hard, very hard, to provide excellent care for the last 32 years. And we work very closely with all the agencies, so I'm not going to sit here and be told that I'm a scammer. The questions are a few things. One is around the whole sort of support and inequality. What I would say on that is, if you see everything recently, starting with the Prime Minister when he was a Chancellor, his furlough scheme was the most innovative one that kept jobs intact, that kept businesses intact. Imagine if that hadn't happened, what the situation could have been today. The other one is all the support, the energy support, the extra housing support. There's been significant amount of support that has been channeled through the local authorities in the last few years post-COVID, including for small businesses. That support is going to the people at the lowest socio-economic part of our demographic. So, you can't say that the Conservatives have not supported all parts of our society. The point about growth that I think Gareth was mentioning, someone else, and Pamela made reference to unionization. I mean, I just cannot believe that in 2024 we're actually talking about a return to 1970s. And if Angela Rayner has a way, we will go back to the 1970s. Collective bargaining, trade unions in power, significant strikes. You laugh, but that's what we'll face, and we have faced, and a real damaged economy. It took years to come out of that. We cannot go back to that. The higher corporation tax and the incentivization for business to invest, that will impact the economy and the growth. And at the end of the day, it is the wealth creation, it is the ability to empower businesses that creates upliftment and greater standards for living for all. So I think it's really important that we don't forget that in a room full of socialists.
Okay. So we'll get chance. But quite importantly here, guys, can you please listen? I'm sure we'll get a chance to get everyone in. Please, can everyone be? Please, thank you very much. Look, you talked about the support for the poorest in society. I've just looked it up, and it looks like the figure of poverty jumped to 12 million people in 2022 to 2023, and the rate of absolute poverty in the UK now stands at 18%, a rise of 0.78 points. And the absolute poverty is the measure that's used by the Prime Minister when describing the government's record, because the UK has seen the biggest rise in absolute poverty for 30 years. So can I just challenge you on that specific point? You're talking about how the government has been supportive of the poorest in society. The statistics show the opposite. So can you just touch on that?
No, Miqdad, that's a good question. And look, I think there's no hiding for the fact that we've gone through some very difficult times, and we continue to do, even though we are moving out. It still remains challenging. The cost of living crisis has been painful for so many people. We see the queues in the food bank. Gareth has made reference to the homelessness. It is part of my pledge also to address the homelessness in Harrow, to hold the council to account, to build more affordable housing in the right places, rather than all the high-rise buildings that we've seen in Harrow over the previous administration. So I do take the point, Miqdad, that we've gone through some difficult times with very high inflation and cost of living, but the government has done a lot to try and mitigate some of those issues.
Thank you. Pamela, I'd like to get your view on some of those issues that we've talked about now. I appreciate that we're trying to cover a lot in a short period of time. It's unfair. I appreciate that, but we're trying our best. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I mean, Abbas says we'll go back to the 70s with all these terrible strikes. In my lifetime, I've never known more industrial action than in the last few years. Virtually a strike every week. These are the bad years. In 1970, you didn't spend 70% of your income on rent. You didn't have families, even though they were poor, going without food and going to food banks. So maybe the 70s weren't so bad. But don't worry, I'm sure that Labour will not take us back to the 70s at all. And it'll be free from socialists, so don't worry. What I would say is I want to talk about the two-child policy. It's not the only thing that's causing widespread poverty, but it's one of them. And to hear both Labour and Conservatives say they're sticking to that, when Harrow has, because of its diverse population, has larger than average families. So it has a real impact on people in Harrow. But it's not just that. It's the benefit cap, the overall benefit cap. So you get people living in accommodation where the level of wages they get or benefit does not cover the rent. So they go without food. I see this all the time. And people are queuing up at the food bank. And then you get politicians turning up for a photo op at the food bank. That's great, isn't it? They can put it on their website. Many people do not want to go to the food bank. They feel ashamed, they feel embarrassed. They shouldn't, because it is not their fault. But both Labour and Conservative have this victim-blaming attitude where it is the fault of the individual, not the fault of the state for the policies that they introduce. If we think about homelessness, all we hear is we're building more affordable housing. Look around Harrow, all these tower blocks. They were not just built by the last Conservative council. They've been built for years and they're unaffordable. Affordable does not mean affordable. It's a myth. It's smoke and mirrors in the same way that GB Energy that Labour are talking about is now. What we need is overnight we could end a lot of the housing problems in Harrow by introducing rent controls. We used to have them back in the bad old days of the 70s until Thatcher changed that and deregulated the housing market in 1983. We could also up the level of the local housing allowance so that people got housing benefit or universal credit to the level of rent. So they weren't having to go without food and their children go hungry and cold and go to school. They wouldn't need free breakfast because they could provide it themselves. So with the cuts to child benefit, there's been further cuts. The localisation of council tax support has been a disaster for people. People who can't pay those bills have got bailiffs on the doorstep, and then their bills mount more and more. So there's lots that can be done if there's the political will to do it. It's not that difficult. But if only our politicians would listen to people who actually understand, we'd get somewhere.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to our next topic because we've taken more than 20 minutes on that first topic. So we'll move on to immigration, hate crime and security, and I'll change the order. So the first will be Abbas, and for the final one, the first will be Pamela. So Abbas, your party, when it comes to hate crime, your party and the Conservative Party seems to have a particular problem with Muslims, some might argue. Michael Gove likes to create lists of bad Muslims. In fact, Nigel Farage seems to have a bit of a cult following in the party sometimes. When he's talked about young Muslims challenging British values over this weekend, quite problematically,
your Foreign Office Minister, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, seemed to agree with him. You know that former Home Secretary Suella Braverman stated in an article in The Telegraph that Islamists are in charge in Britain, a common conspiracy theory about Muslims, and also expressed by Robert Jenrick. Sir Paul Marshall, the Conservative Party donor, endorsed incendiary tweets. Liz Truss shared a platform with Steve Bannon, the far-right activist, and agreed with his assertion that Tommy Robinson was a hero, and those were all in 1 week. So it's not just the past, though. Also, the Conservative Party candidate, Nick Timothy, openly advocated discrimination against Muslims, calling for a register of imams and mosques and not those of other faiths. Many communities have called the Conservative Party institutionally Islamophobic. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, Miqdad, you make some very good points there. So, firstly, I'm not familiar with all those things, but I think I'm not disputing that we do have an issue with Islamophobia. Firstly, we have an issue with Islamophobia in society as a whole. It's not a political problem, it's a society problem. It's very much with the evidence you've given, it's something that has had evidence in the Conservative Party. It's got evidence, if you read the Ford report, in the Labour Party as well. I feel very uncomfortable, to be honest, Miqdad. I have talked a lot about this topic. I have publicly condemned some of the instances that you mentioned. More privately, in a lot of discussions within my party, with Conservative Muslim Forum, it's a continuous agenda for the fight against Islamophobia, not just within the party, but in society as a whole. There shouldn't be any place for racism or Islamophobia within any party, and it's certainly within the values of conservatism, which is why I'm a conservative. We're not, we can go into it later but I've publicly spoken plenty of times why I'm a conservative. There's nothing in the values of conservatism that would suggest that it should be Islamophobic or racist. Absolutely nothing. So what I do want the opportunity is for people like me to be within the party. It's pretty obvious to state the obvious. I'm not a right-wing Tory. I'm very much at the centre ground, one nation conservative. You need people like me within the party to try and fight this. And Miqdad, we've had these conversations. Miqdad's doing an amazing job in his fight, with many fights, but fight against Islamophobia. I pledge to him and others too that if I get the opportunity, I will work with you, Miqdad, to ensure that we get the definition of Islamophobia adopted in the Conservative Party. I will try my best, and that's my pledge.
Thank you, sir. So you've acknowledged there's obviously Islamophobia in the party.
There is, yeah.
Do you think there's a particular problem of Islamophobia in your party? Do you admit and acknowledge that there is a real specific problem in your party?
I mean, I have already acknowledged it in my answer to your question. There certainly is, and that's why I'm fighting against it. If there wasn't, I wouldn't be fighting it. I don't think it's a conservative. There's nothing. Look, the party is a function of its members, right? At the end of the day, what is the party? There's nothing in the constitution of the Conservative Party that says they have to support certain countries or certain races or certain religions. It's just a function of the membership. So it has been a bit of chicken and egg, Miqdad. We've had these conversations for many,
But don't you think, Nigel, like, for example, when you have the majority of the Conservative Party members having Islamophobic views according to polls, when you have the situation where large number of MPs, if not the majority of MPs, support people like Nigel Farage, who are clearly Islamophobic, why don't you see that whether or not the Conservative Party should be Islamophobic, it is, and that's a serious problem.
Okay, so you make a very good point about the members and the poll of the members. 15 million people voted for Conservatives in the 2019 election. 15 million. 150,000 members, I can do the maths, is 1%. So 1% of the people who actually put a cross next to the Conservative ballot are members.
But those are the people who chose your Prime Minister, right?
Well, Miqdad, I've done a lot of education, particularly in our communities, as you know. I've been banging on about it for... There are a lot of people in our community, maybe not in this room, but generally in our Khoja community or Muslim community. There are many people, because we're inherently conservative. We ethnic, my dad has been a member for 30 years. When I first came, the reason I am a conservative is I believe that the values of conservatism are fully aligned to my faith, and my principles and values are aligned to my culture and my faith. The thing is that not enough my kind of conservatives are becoming members, so you've got a skewed representation. And I have been advocating that more people who are conservative inclined, I'm certainly not suggesting people on the left side of the political spectrum, but those that are conservative inclined in our communities should pay that 25 quid or whatever it is now and become members, because they can exercise influence through that, which currently is not happening.
Thank you very much. I'd like to move to Gareth, who is now on the screen on the left-hand side right now. Yes, of course he is. It's just that. Gareth, obviously the issue of Islamophobia is one that faces the Conservative Party, and people talk about it a lot within the Conservative Party. But within the Labour Party, the Labour Muslim Network showed in its poll that most Muslims don't trust the leadership to take Islamophobia seriously. There's a point to the Ford report which accused Labour of in effect, and in quotes, in effect operating a hierarchy of racism or of discrimination and not taking Islamophobia as seriously as other forms of racism. And when a person said about Muslim councillors leaving the party that they were shaking off the fleas, that's dehumanizing language akin to the Nazi language of Goebbels used about Jews. When they were talking about Muslims leaving the party, that person is known in the party, but no action's been taken. And at the same time, we know that people like Neil Coyle has been allowed to run, even though he engaged in anti-Semitism, although he apologized for it. But Faiza Shaheen recently hasn't. And she wasn't allowed to run. And she raised the issue of Islamophobia in the party, and that was part of the reason given as to why she wasn't allowed to run. So does this prove that there is a serious problem of Islamophobia within the Labour Party? And there actually is a hierarchy of racism in how Islamophobia is dealt with in the party? Gareth?
Well, let me firstly say that I know there are, from the conversations I've had with a number of people in the Muslim community in Harrow, that there are people have been the victim of Islamophobia here in Harrow, and that I or whoever is elected as your Member of Parliament has a responsibility to speak out about Islamophobia here in our community and use the platform of being in Parliament to challenge Islamophobia more widely. So what I have done on that score is to speak out most recently, for example, on calling out Suella Braverman, who called pro-Palestinian marches hate marches. I certainly don't see them in that regard, and I thought her comments were deeply unpleasant. I know that British Muslims are the victims of the highest level of hate crime in our country, and I think one of the ways that we could begin to call all our public services to help and tackle that rise in Islamophobia is by adopting the independently drafted definition of Islamophobia that was produced by a cross-party group of MPs, the all-party group of Muslims recently. The Conservative Party, the only party that won't adopt that definition. So if there is a change of government at the next election, if you vote Labour on July the 4th, we will be able to see government adopting that definition. We can't be complacent in the Labour Party. I completely accept that challenge. I certainly will continue to speak out in support of against Islamophobia. I apologise, and certainly I will continue to support publicly the Muslim Council of Britain. And Miqdad, certainly I will continue to support your work in challenging Islamophobia in the media.
Thank you, Gareth. Can I just point to the specific questions that I raised, though? When an individual was talking about shaking off the fleas when he was talking about Muslims leaving the party, that's Nazi language,
let me
right?
be clear. Let me be clear. That is, I don't know who the individual is, but that language, certainly if it comes from someone in the Labour Party, is completely unacceptable, and they should face disciplinary action. I genuinely don't know who that individual is, but they certainly don't speak for me.
And what about Faiza Shaheen? One of the big challenges that people are talking about are Muslims who are standing for the party not being given the same opportunities as others. Faiza Shaheen is just one example of one who wasn't allowed to run, and part of the reason given in the discussions was that she raised the issue of Islamophobia in the party and the Islamophobia that she's faced. And it's very unusual, it seems, that when a Muslim talks about these issues, and potentially has said things in the past that have been problematic, they're not allowed to run. But individuals such as Neil Coyle and others have engaged in anti-Semitism, but are allowed to run, but because they seem to be closer to the leadership. What do you think is happening here? Is it Islamophobia in action, or do you think it's something else?
Well, I don't know the details of the Faiza Shaheen case, but I would gently point out that we have people of Muslim faith in very senior positions in the party. There's not many positions more senior than the Mayor of London, and Sadiq Khan is doing a great job. Anas Sawa I hope is going to lead a Labour resurgence in Scotland at the general election on July the 4th. They are two very high profile Labour figures who are also Muslims who speak out on Islamophobia in the party. And we will have a very, I think the highest number of Muslim candidates this time around standing for the Labour Party, I believe. We'll have Shabana Mahmood, for example, likely to be in the cabinet if Labour is elected to power at the election on July the 4th. So absolutely, we cannot be complacent about this issue in the party. We certainly cannot be complacent about it in Harrow. And if I'm re-elected as your Member of Parliament, I will continue to speak out against Islamophobia.
Thank you, Gareth. Pamela, on the issue of hate crime, I can't speak to you about a party and the issues in that party, but can you talk to me a bit about your views on what should happen when it comes to hate crime in politics and in our society as a whole?
Yeah, so a few years ago in my work, we found that lots of people coming into the law centre had been victims of hate crime. And we said, well, have you reported it? And they would say, yes, but, you know, I went to my councillor, I went to my MP, blah, 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 and nothing happened. And they'd given up. And we called a meeting in my workplace. We called a meeting, and just informally, you know, come and discuss. We didn't have any speakers. We just let people speak. Every single person who came to that meeting had been a victim of hate crime. And I think virtually everybody that was there was Muslim. Virtually every single person. And what they said was they go to these meetings, these community meetings, and there'll be community leaders, there might be councillors, there might be police, and they'll talk at them. They don't listen to them about what's needed. So that is something that needs to happen. But it's not enough. Both Labour and Conservatives have a problem with both Islamophobia, racism, and I would say misogyny as well. But it's not enough for the individual MPs like Gareth to say, I stand up and speak out against it. Because if you're part of an institution and there's institutionalised racism, so let's start with Prevent, shall we? Who thinks Prevent is a great scheme? No, it's not. Who introduced Prevent? Labour. Who continued Prevent? Tories. It's no different. And I've had parents speak to me terrified because their child has said the wrong thing at school. Gaza has highlighted this so much, with children trying to speak about relatives who've been killed in Gaza and they've been told they can't. They've been suspended and even expelled. And let's talk about immigration, shall we, to see where there is racism within the two parties. The immigration system personifies racism. And if we take just two examples recently of how people fleeing war regimes were treated, let's compare those coming from Afghanistan who had worked for the British government or for companies and helped the British government to the Ukrainian nationals. Yes. How many Afghans have come in? Very, very few. Thousands of Ukrainians. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I've got nothing against Ukrainians. But we should treat people equally. If you come here as an asylum seeker, I had the other day knocking on the door, you're an asylum seeker, you get given a house, a car, a mobile phone. You don't. Obviously you don't. The Labour government introduced laws that asylum seekers are dispersed away from London and the South East, and they're not entitled to social security. They're not entitled to public housing. They're put in terrible accommodation in the North East generally. And what's happened in the North East? Lots of kind of racism, unrest. So there's racism that needs to be tackled at an institutional level. It's not enough for these people to stand by and say, well, I'm not racist myself, and of course I speak out about Islamophobia, but you know, I can't help what's going on in my party because I don't know who it was that said shaking off the fleas, when the whole country knows who it was.
Okay, great. Let me just get some thoughts from the audience if anyone would like to. I'm going to get a couple. Let's start with Hanya there, and then we'll move across just there on the right-hand side, and I'll bring in Gillia. Yeah. Elisa, please go ahead.
Hello. Gareth, it's great that you can accept and condemn racism and anti-Muslim hatred in the Tory party. It's actually quite welcoming that Abbas just accepted and pledged to fight Islamophobia in his party. The clearly racist treatment against Faiza Shaheen and Diane Abbott's recently is deeply worrying and has rightly so shone a light into the dangers of a Labour Party in power. Will you right now accept and condemn the growing anti-Muslim hatred and racism in your Labour Party, Gareth? And would a Labour government in power only escalate attacks and abuse on brown, Muslim and black communities?
Thank you, Hania. Just push it. Thank you. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to... So I just want... Is it me? Stand up.
The light needs to be off.
Okay, thank you. Just a really short experience of myself in the local Labour Party that Gareth is the MP of. So, first of all, can I just say, Luke Akers is a very close ally of Gareth Thomas. He is one of the biggest Islamophobes in the Labour Party. And he's going to deny it, but actually he comments on Gareth's tweets. Gareth's tweets don't get many comments. He does. He runs a local Labour Party that Muslims get attacked. Myself, I have been told that I'm an anti-Semite for the crime of being Muslim, pretty much, for the crime of being Muslim. Women and ethnic minority women, black women, brown women, they get treated like second-class citizens. I'm not a fan of Faiza Shaheen. She's not from my wing of the party. I don't really think of her as particularly left-wing. But her treatment is atrocious. That meeting we had on Channel 4. I'm sorry to say that you have voted for the Iraq war. You've never said sorry. You voted for bombing of Syria. You never said sorry. You did not vote for a meaningful ceasefire for Gaza. You can say you're not an Islamophobe, but you act like one.
Okay, let's get one final comment. One final comment from the back there. One final comment from the back there, and then we're going to get some responses.
Thank you. I used to be a teacher. I can attest to the fact that Prevent used to disproportionately affect Muslim children. I want to know, are Labour going to be standing on their 2019 pledge of scrapping Prevent? What are they going to be doing with Prevent? And how do we ensure that as Muslims we feel safe sending our children to school? Not feeling like we have to stop, we have to protect them, we have to shade them because we're too scared to send them to school or what's going to happen to them at school. How do we ensure that?
Thank you. Gareth, those questions were aimed at you. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes and then I'll come to Abbas to ask another question from the Slido. Please go ahead. Gareth.
Thanks very much, Big Dad. Good to hear you, Aguila, again. Just let me pick up some of the points that you made and the previous questioner asked about as well. Look, on Diane Abbott, she's not someone I often agree with, but I'm very glad that she is going to be standing as a member of Parliament this time for the Labour Party going forward. As I say, I genuinely don't know the Fazia Shaheen the details of her case. But I do gently repeat again that there are a large number of Muslim candidates standing for the Labour Party this time, who I believe will continue to make a real difference in the party across a range of issues and also on Islamophobia. And I think the fact that the Labour Party can elect as leader of the Scottish Labour Party and as our Mayor of London two people of tremendous ability who are also Muslims is testimony to the fact that, yes, I'm sure we do still have challenges around Islamophobia, that we can't be complacent, but that those of Muslim faith can aspire to the very highest levels in our party. On Prevent, we'll be publishing our manifesto next week. I understand there are concerns about the way in which Prevent operated. And we've certainly got to make sure that the Muslim community has confidence in what the Home Office does going forward. So it's an issue that I will have to look at if I'm re-elected, and very happy to do that.
Thank you, Gareth. I'm going to try and move quickly because I'm trying to cover areas. So, Abbas, you wanted to raise something, but I just want to check one question with you, which has come through, which is on immigration.
Yeah.
You talked about how you were on the centre of your party, not on the right of your party. What's your view on immigration, given it's a topic that's come up? Do you support the Rwanda scheme? What do you think should happen when it comes to the issue of immigration, given the policies of your government?
Fine. I'll answer that, and then I wanted to come back on a couple of other points as well. So, look, immigration, I'm an immigrant. Pretty much everyone here is an immigrant. So immigration is a good thing. We have all contributed significantly to British society, and vice versa. British society and the country has given a lot to us as well. In our care business, we have immigrant workers. Frankly, it wouldn't survive without immigrant workers. So immigration per se is a good thing. But we have to have controlled immigration. We can't have open borders because of the way the variation of sort of economic prosperity of different countries. There has to be control in the borders. And there's two forms of immigration. By and large, the biggest number of immigrants are legal migrants, right? And people focus so much on the small boats, but in some ways it's a bit of a red herring because it's 15 times more people come through the legal route. And what recently the Home Secretary has done, and yes, it affects my business in a negative way, but it's absolutely the right thing, is increase the threshold of the wage limits for people to come in, restriction on dependents, and also the right type of skills. So these are all good measures that the current government has put in to control the level of immigration. You've got to remember, a lot of the immigration comes through students as well. It's our top 10 exports is British universities.
So do you support the Rwanda scheme?
On the illegal scheme, on the illegal side, we have to have a deterrent. So I do agree with the fact that we have to have a deterrent against the criminal gangs that are bringing boats and risking people's lives, frankly, to the UK. So there has to be a deterrent. At a personal level, I've never really been a fan of the Rwanda scheme, but then nothing else has seemed to work. And I think the Prime Minister has... Yeah, but no. We have to control. There's no debate about the fact that the boats can't keep coming through, right? So I think in a concept of deterrent, I agree with, and everything we do should be humane and compassionate. I'll say one more thing. Immigration control. I'm obviously a migrant and a big supporter of migration, but immigration control is not a racist thing. Is not at all a uncompassionate thing. It's about making sure that the people who live here have got the right support and the right infrastructure to support their needs. So it's only fair to the people living here.
So just on that point on immigration, you said that you want to reduce net migration in essence, right?
Yes.
Is that fair? Because what's happening is that immigration, according to most economists, including the Treasury, is linked to higher GDP. So what you're saying is that you like to cut immigration, which means that you're going to cut the GDP growth in our country. What do you think is the right thing to get behind for that? So you're cutting immigration, so you're cutting our growth. That means you're going to cut more services. Is that something that you believe in?
No, so we're not going to stop immigration.
Cut immigration.
No, we're going to control the immigration to the right level, which is going to be advised by the Migration Advisory Committee. So it's an independent committee which will set the number of immigrants per year. So that's an independent process. But the point, Miqdad, is that immigration will still continue, and it will still continue to the economy, but it also needs we need to increase the wage levels. I think one of the brother was saying, it's really important, you make a right point, is about the productivity and increase of wages is really important from domestic workers. Today, we've got a fairly low growth economic environment, although we are the highest in G7. Someone mentioned before that we weren't. We are the highest in G7. But we've got a low growth economic environment, but yet we've got 1 million job vacancies, Miqdad. 1 million job vacancies that remain. So we got a way to work with getting people living in this country back to work.
Thank you. I know I'd love to, but I'm going to get Pamela in, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Sorry, Pamela, go ahead.
Thank you. So our immigration system is racist. If you want to come from a country, say Canada or something, it's not too difficult. If you want to come from a country such as Pakistan, you're a visa national. You've got to get a visa before you come. And they put in place measures. You've got to wait 2 years to get your appointment to get a visa. It is inherently, if you look at the list of visa national countries, they're all countries where people are black or brown. They are not countries where you are white or, whatever. So there is that. With asylum seekers, with the small boats, people will come on boats because they're facing worse where they are, and because there are no safe routes. So it's ridiculous to say we're going to catch the criminal gangs. They will always be gangs. They're not all, well, I suppose they are criminal, but they're helping people to escape from war, from terror. If you look at the people who are coming on the boats and which countries they're coming from, they're pretty much countries where dire things are going on. If you think about Syria, Sudan, still Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, all of these countries, and mainly places where we have interfered, actually.
Thank you.
Just one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was a report. So again, Abbas is saying, well, I think this, I think that. It's what their parties are doing. Their parties are saying, we're cracking down on immigration. The Lancet produced a report, the medical journal, The Lancet, produced a report a few weeks ago saying, we have such a drop in the birth rate, we need a programme of mass migration to pay for our pensions. Which politician in mainstream parties are telling you that? They're not.
Very, very quickly, 2 points. One is just a quick one. The majority of people coming to the UK are brown, like me, from India, so that's the highest number of immigrants. But anyway, the point I wanted to make was a practical one about hate crime. I've done quite a bit of work, both in where I'm a counsellor and with the Harrow police force as well, on hate crime statistics, particularly post-October 7th. My advice to everyone here, and this is quite serious, is whenever you're a victim of hate crime, please report it. Because when I look at the stats, there's a significant underrepresentation of Islamophobia hate crime. And I'm literally talking about, there's only about 23 or 25 the last time I looked at it. There cannot be just that many, so little hate crime incidents. There's a lot more anti-Semitism, and that's good as well, because obviously the fight against hate crime is against all forms of hate crime. But it is my request to all of you, if you are victims, and I have said that in many of my community broadcasts, that please do report, because it's a highly underreported statistic.
Thank you very much. We are going to move to our next topic, which is on foreign policy. I'm going to ask, if it's okay, Gareth, Abbas and Pamela, and apologies for not telling you this in advance. I'm just going to ask you a series of 4 questions, and I'm just going to ask you for a yes, no, or maybe, and I'm happy for you to say maybe and explain later, but just to get you the chance to talk on that, and then I'll ask you specific questions and give you the chance to give some commentary on that, if that's okay. So I'm going to start with the question, because Gaza is an important area. The first question I'd like to ask all of you is, and literally, please, just yes, no, or maybe, is, do you support the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice's independence? Do you support that? Gareth?
Migdad, the straight answer to that is yes. I'm not going to commit to just giving a one-word answer to your other questions, because I think the crisis in Gaza, which horrifies us all, demands more than just one word.
I'll give you lots of.
But on that particular question, yes, I do support the ICC and the ICJ.
Abbas?
Yes.
Yes, Pamela? Yes. Perfect. All 3 yes. So, if the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, should we abide by it? Gareth?
As I understand it, the ICC is seeking arrest warrants against both a number of figures, including Mr. Netanyahu on the Israeli side.
Guys! I will chair it. I will ask the question, please. Thank you.
I've answered your question, and I support the work of both courts. So yes.
Yes. Great. Abbas?
Same.
Yes. And?
Absolutely, and I would cheer.
Okay, great. Do you support a Palestinian state, or must that be reliant on Israel admitting and allowing that to happen? Gareth?
I voted for recognition of a Palestinian state over 10 years ago. I do support recognition, yes.
Thank you. Abbas?
Absolutely, it's part of the two-state solution, yes.
But do you think it has to be reliant on Israel saying yes, or you're happy to independently say that there should be a Palestinian state?
There should be a Palestinian state, and there should be a separate Israeli state as well.
And yes. Okay, and final question before I ask a more specific question and get the audience's views in. Should we sell arms to Israel as it commits war crimes and engages in what leading experts believe to be genocide against the Palestinians? Should we sell arms to Israel right now?
if Israel's breaking international law, then we shouldn't be selling arms sales. We should not be selling arms sales in any situation where international humanitarian law is being breached. It's one of the reasons why Labour has called very clearly for the government to publish the legal advice it's been given.
I'm not sure whether he can hear if people are audience. So, thank you, Abbas.
Look, I've discussed this a number of times, then most recently with the Defence Secretary as well.
Should you support?
I do support, yes. But I just want to put things into context that actually people might not know this, but we only supply 45 million, maybe less, between 37 and 45 million of crime. Yeah. No. This is.
Wait, let him answer. Let him answer. We'll give him. We're going to get great opportunities. We'll get great opportunity to get everyone's views.
I'm not disagreeing with you. This is more a point of information because I think there's.
So do you think we should stop?
Yeah, I
arms
have said
sales?
that. Yes.
We should stop arms sales, and should we, Pamela?
We have to stop arms sales, and those supplying arms ought to be held to account as well.
Okay. Thank you. And Pamela, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask one more question to each of the audience, where they give you a chance to give greater views on this. So, on the issue of Gaza, you've been someone who's been quite vocal on this issue. Yeah. Do you worry that by you being there and not part of a party, you can't actually effect that change that you're talking about?
I think myself and all the hundreds of people, many here today, have already affected change. Yeah. Labour were doing nothing before. They've been forced into a mealy-mouthed demand for a ceasefire. But we will get Netanyahu convicted. We will have him held to account. Because our politicians are not doing it, so we have to do it. I'm one of many. I don't think individually I can do it. With everybody I can. And certainly our politicians, just remember, they have failed us. Remember the comments by Keir Starmer after the 7th of October. And he is supposed to be a human rights lawyer. He knows international law. He knew what he was saying. Gareth, none of the Labour councillors, Abbas, none of them have been on the marches. I haven't seen any of them. And what particularly affects me, I've worked with asylum seekers from all countries since the early 90s. So some from Palestine, some from Iraq, Iran, everywhere. And I see the heartbreak of people having to leave behind their families. And I cannot bear what has been unfolding on our screens since the 7th of October. But what has made it worse, I can tell you, is the response by politicians like Gareth, Keir Starmer, the Tories, and everybody else. We have to end this.
Thank you. Second, I think, is Gareth on this. Gareth, on the issue of Gaza, and I'd like to give you the chance, obviously, to talk about it and give the context that you talked about earlier. You'll be aware that the issues when it comes to Keir Starmer, he's been particularly poor on the issue of Gaza, and poor might be an understatement. He claims, as you'll be aware, Keir Starmer, obviously, and the Labour Party claimed support for international law, but famously or infamously supported the use of collective punishment in that LBC interview. The party seems to have been behind even David Cameron and the Conservative Party on many of the improvements in policy on Gaza, and even kicked people out of the shadow cabinet because they supported an immediate ceasefire. And on the issue of leadership, so if the Labour Party in opposition is so bad on this issue of genocide, how can we trust the leadership credentials of potentially our next Prime Minister on foreign policy decisions when he wasn't able to make the right decisions here?
Look, let me firstly be very clear that I share the horror at what we have been seeing on an almost daily basis in Gaza for far too long. The images just from Al Shifa today and the stories that are unfolding there are just the latest in a terrible litany of events since October the 7th, and I have always wanted the fighting to stop. I recognise that the interview on LBC just after October the 7th caused deep offence and upset, and I recognise that was compounded by the fact that we took too long to clarify our position and to make clear that Israel, in its response to the events of October 7th, does have to apply by international law. Let me address the question of the ceasefire vote back in November very directly. There were two motions that night. One proposed by the SNP for a ceasefire, which 56 Labour MPs decided to vote for. I respected and still do their decision. But there was also a motion that Labour tabled, which called for a cessation of violence, for the violence to stop, which I voted for, and indeed which every member of the Labour Party voted for. And I did that because I didn't believe at the time that Mr. Netanyahu and the government of Israel would listen to calls for a ceasefire. I believed that there was a chance that they would listen to calls for a pause in the fighting, to allow hostages to be got out, and for humanitarian aid to be got in. And indeed, for a short time, there was a pause, and there were hostages got out, and there was humanitarian aid got in. But it's true that the pause didn't lead to a permanent end to the fighting. And that's why we did shift our position to join others in the international community to call for a ceasefire. And for months now, we've been clear that there has to be a ceasefire in Gaza, that there has to be the return of the hostages, of course, that there has to be huge amounts of humanitarian got in to prevent the famine and the crisis in the hospitals that we all know about in Gaza, and that there shouldn't be any Israeli incursion into Rafah. And that remains very clearly our position. We want that ceasefire. Keir Starmer made clear in an interview just last week that if he was asked if he had a conversation with Mr. Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, he would make clear that he wanted Israel to stop.
Gareth, thanks for that. Can I just ask you on that? You've talked about the fact that the Labour Party has moved its position. It's become on a number of issues, but it seems to have done that after the Conservative Party in many of these cases, after David Cameron in many of these cases. And the question that I'd like to ask you is, Keir Starmer is likely to be our next Prime Minister, and he hasn't been leading, he's been following on this issue. We're obviously, as people across the country, going to be electing our next Prime Minister through whichever party you vote for. So how can it be that someone is voting for someone who, in essence, is supporting a genocide or not fighting or not standing up against that genocide? Would you, for example, and maybe this is a more direct way of doing it, want to start that journey by acknowledging that Israel is currently committing genocide in Gaza, and that at least is a demonstration of taking leadership when it comes to the Labour Party on that position?
Well, I think there are a number of clear differences between Labour and the Conservatives on our response to what's the terrible things that are going on in Gaza. We're very clear in, firstly, our support for the ICC and the ICJ. We're very clear about the need, as the Conservatives won't do, is to start refunding UNRWA. Indeed, it's one of the things that has always been a significant difference between Labour and the Conservatives on our approach to the Palestinians. We have always funded support for UNRWA. Indeed, when I was a minister in the last Labour government in the Department for International Development, UNRWA had a record level of funding.
Gareth,
and I just gently say that the last time,
Gareth, on that, just one thing, Lisa, just one thing. I'll give you the chance.
Arms sales to Israel was under a Labour government because arms sales couldn't be justified because it wouldn't have complied with international law. So there are significant differences between our position and that of
Thank you
the
for
Conservatives.
Thank you for laying those out. Just on the issues of UNRWA funding, I recall Lisa Nandy being on TV saying that she was supportive of the funding being removed from UNRWA. So I appreciate that that's changed again. But can I just ask, in terms of leadership, do you think that Labour Party is leading on this issue of on foreign policy?
Well, I think we've been clear that one of the big differences, for example, between us and the Conservatives is on response to Gaza, is on our support for the ICC, which we helped to establish when we were in power under the last Labour government, and the work of the ICJ. We do support international humanitarian law. It's one of the big differences between us and the Conservatives in recent years. So that is an area where we're clearly showing leadership, and there is a clear contrast between our position and that of the Conservatives on funding for UNRWA. When you're in opposition, you obviously have to look at things and challenge government and hold it to account. I hope that we will be in a position after July the 4th to demonstrate where we stand obviously in more detail on this and to take leadership. And I hope that we'll, by that time, have seen a ceasefire. But if not, we'll continue to be calling for a ceasefire, but no incursion in Rafah, and for an immediate increase, significant increase in the levels of humanitarian aid going into Gaza.
Thank you, Gareth. So, Abbas, I haven't spoken to you on this issue, and I'd like to get the audience in afterwards. The Conservative Party have been pretty poor on the issue of Gaza, most recently calling the ICC prosecutor submission as unhelpful, not even supporting international law. When it comes to the issue of Gaza, why is the Conservative Party so bad on the issue? And I appreciate that you've talked about your own position on these issues of the ICC, the ICJ, and even an arrest warrant for Netanyahu and the Palestinian state. But those are against the Conservative Party policy currently on these issues. So what is the Conservative Party policy, and why are you in a party which is supporting those types of policies?
Yeah. So look, as I said in my introduction, Miqdad, that I have taken a strong stance on this, and very early on, despite some of the misconceptions. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying, I have taken a strong stance on this, and from very early on, and there are some people in this room who had a call from me in the middle of October to invite them to come to my first parliamentary roundtable. So it is something that I've taken very seriously. In terms of alignment to parties, what I do say is that one cannot never be fully aligned to, and a lot of people come to me for advice in terms of starting a political career, some young people and older, and my advice is always consistent to them, is you've got to go with the party that you broadly aligned to, your convictions are broadly aligned to, your values are broadly aligned to. You will never ever fully align to every single policy of every party. But for me, it was fairly clear, but where there are instances, and only a very few instances, where I do not agree, what I have demonstrated is that I have got the courage and the ability to be a strong voice, and I will continue to do so as I have been consistently.
Thank you. I'd love to get some views from the audience. I'm going to get there are already a lot of hands up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get about 5 or 6 views from everywhere, as many people as I can, and please apologize if I don't get to you. Let's start with Chris at the front here, and then I'll get a couple from the back as well. I'll go around. I'll try my best to get as many as you can. Apologies if I can't. Chris, go ahead.
I've listened to the debate this evening and would like to say that in my view, and in the view of our party, that is likely to be the official opposition after the general election, that Gaza is the most important foreign policy of this issue, and it is quite clear that it's not being seriously looked at by some of the political parties here. I would also like to say that it looks as though the Tories are debating as to whether they're going to go down from 60 to 140 MPs, and they might even not be the official opposition. So I think, frankly, that the Conservative candidate is effectively down, possibly even down and out. And I'll say one thing as well to the independent, much as I respect her views, she is an independent. I am the representative of one of the national political parties.
Thank you, Chris. I'll just get some views from the audience, right at the back first, and then we'll come round. I'll try and come to you as well if I can. Just at the back there on the right-hand side. Just there, yeah. Somewhere there, someone put their hand up, is that right? Yeah.
Hello.
Please feel free to stand up if it's easier. Yeah. Please keep it as short as you can. We're trying to get as many views as possible. Thanks.
Gareth, I think the Conservative position is bad here, but Gareth, yours is unforgivable. You can mince your words around genocide as much as you want, but your actions are the ones that we can judge you by. You voted for the Iraq War. You spent a decade blocking investigations into the Iraq War. The first time I ever contacted you as a constituent was to ask you not to vote for airstrikes in Syria. You did that anyway, and then in Gaza you failed again. So what you've shown us is that you will always stick with the Labour whip. You will never, doesn't matter what's going to happen in the future, you will always stick with an imperialist foreign policy. Yeah, I agree. So please explain, you've been given a chance to explain to us how you're going to represent your very diverse constituency, and you haven't done it, and you still failed to do it.
Thank you. Let's get in the front here first. I'm really sorry. I'm going to disappoint so many people. Please.
Both Gareth and Abbas have been using strange language when they describe Gaza, as their parties have done. When it comes to October the 7th, this is the start of the conflict. This is horrific. This is terrible. No evidence whatsoever has been presented except from Israeli authorities. But in Gaza, you say people have died. X number of people have lost their lives. Totally different language, and you're still using it. Even I recall earlier on, you used one sentence of yours. You said, in response to the horrific events of October the 7th, Israel did blah, blah, blah. What horrific events on October the 7th? There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever for any of the Israeli allegations, and yet you're still propagating Israeli propaganda, both of you.
Thank you. Please go ahead there. Yes, please go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry. My question is very simple. Muqdad, you asked a question to Gareth. I don't think it takes a genius to know what's the horrific things that are going on in Gaza. It's very clearly a genocide. You asked a simple question that do you acknowledge it's a genocide? I just got a lot of political waffle. And I don't think you can pull the wool over people's eyes here. I just want to hear a simple yes or no. Even similarly from you, Abbas, or the independent, or even from the Liberal Democrat point of view. Is what you're seeing in Gaza a genocide? Yes or no?
Thank you. And final question here, and then I'll try and get another round up. That's probably going to be it.
Would the candidates, if elected, be prepared to call for immediate massive sanctions on Israel until it agrees to abide by international law, even if it means going against a three-line party whip?
Great. I think we've got really wide-ranging views there, and we want to make sure that we hear those views, we listen to those views as much as possible. So, Pamela, would you like to start, and we'll go around?
Yes, I mean, in response to the last question, absolutely. What can I say? It's heartbreaking what's happening. It's completely heartbreaking. I don't know how anybody can give us political waffle when they see what's on the TV night after night. I mean, it kind of leaves me speechless in a way, really. So, what can I say?
Thank you. And Abbas, do you want to respond to anything? Yeah. Obviously, the horrific attacks on October 7th, we talked about the barbarity that's happened after, the genocide that happens after. Are you willing to talk about that?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I've said it already tonight, and I've said it in my public statements that are available to all on my Instagram. And
right now, though,
yeah, absolutely. So there's and I agree with what Pamela's saying. It's heartbreaking. It's barbaric. It's beyond. It's nothing worse like this has happened in my lifetime, and I've 48 years. I haven't seen anything worse than this. So it's beyond. It's just completely disproportionate. Look. I'm not avoiding the word, but I genuinely don't understand. I'm not. I have said, look,
guys,
I have categorically stood by. Consistently from the end of October until June the 5th today, I've been consistent in my views. I have had the courage. I've had the courage to go against my party. I have got the courage to go against my party, and I will stick by. So I'm not going to have anyone tell me that I have not been supporting the cause.
Okay. Sanctions? Do you support sanctions?
Yeah, I mean, look, Pamela can offer anything because she will never have to answer to that. No, you will never have to answer to any of this, right? So, the position that me and Gareth will be in is we have to promise what we can deliver. You know enough about today that I will stand up. I have, and I will continue. I will continue to stand up, and I have gone against my party.
That's what.
I answer to constituents and residents. That's who I answer to.
Okay.
But you'll never have to answer to them, so you can say what you want.
Okay, so that's quite clear. Gareth, there are a few comments. Could you like to address them? In particular, is it a genocide? Do you support sanctions? And also the discussion earlier, the previous questions on your previous positions on Iraq and other areas.
Would you like to touch on those?
Just to reiterate, I mean, I've used my position in Parliament to call for consistently an end to the violence in the terrible violence that we're seeing in Gaza. It is horrific. I've called consistently for months now for a ceasefire and for an end to the IDF incursion into Rafah, for UNRWA to be properly funded again, and for a huge surge in humanitarian aid. I support the work of the ICC and ICJ. Genocide is a legal term. I welcome the fact that the ICJ is looking at the request for an investigation into whether genocide is happening in Gaza that South Africa has brought. I support the ICJ's work, and I support the ICC's work. And I just say to people, I have used my voice privately in meetings within the Parliamentary Labour Party to push for a change in our party's position, and I'm glad our position has shifted. And on occasion, I will continue to do that if I'm re-elected on July the 4th. And I come back again. There is a clear difference between Labour's position on these issues and the Conservatives' position, and that will be on the ballot paper on July the 4th as well.
I think it's quite clear if he's not choosing to answer that question that he doesn't think it is right now. I think that's
that's not fair, Mick. I support the work of the ICJ. They are investigating.
Could I just say one thing on that, because I didn't speak?
A request to do so by South Africa, and it's right that we should back international law in an international process to do that.
Really briefly say something.
Okay.
Briefly.
Pamela.
Can I
guys,
just say?
Anyway, let's
hold on.
Let's Pamela speak. Let Pamela speak, please. Sorry.
It is a genocide. You can see it's a genocide. It's playing out on our TV. And what I would say is hiding behind what the International Court of Justice does. Okay, I work in a law centre. I have huge respect for the law and the international courts. But we know what pressure, what threats have been put on the investigators. And they are brave for standing up for that. And it is not in recent months. This has been going on for years, that Israel has been threatening people for doing their jobs. So we cannot be sure that the outcome of the International Court of Justice will be the right one. I hope it is. I hope they're brave. I hope they stand up to this. What's happening? It's genocide. If you're attacking civilians, if you're targeting civilians, if you're withholding food, all of the things that are happening constitute genocide.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry that we have run out of time. It's time for Maghrib, which will be coming soon. What I would like to do is give the opportunity for each of the panelists. Thank you so much for coming. And I'd love to give you a couple of minutes each to give closing statements, your thoughts on overall what's going to go on. And so I'd start with Pamela and go up to Gareth. So Pamela.
Thank you. You've heard from our two male representatives from the Tories and Labour that nobody else can win, only them. Well, it's not true. You just need to use your vote wisely. Now, you can't vote for a Tory. Surely you cannot vote for a Tory. They have destroyed this country. They must be punished for what they've done, for the corruption, for everything that's gone past. They must be. Remember the parties during COVID when many of us were trying to bury our dead. But you can't vote for Gareth. Why can't you vote for Gareth? Well, he can't even come to a meeting. How can he represent you when he's too scared to come to a meeting? If I am your MP, I will come to meetings. I mean, I won't be scared to come and meet with you. Why should I be? And it's also been said, well, I'm just an independent. I'm just one on my own. Well, I'm not actually. I'm part of something called The Collective, which you may have heard of. And it's a broad banner that we hope will become a party in the future. And we've got 15 candidates at the moment who are standing. So there's myself. I won't name them all, but some you will have heard, because some have been here. So, for example, Andrew Feinstein standing against Keir Starmer. Liam Mohammed standing against Wes Streeting. Claudia Webb up in Leicester. And there's others. And then that little-known person that you might have just heard of, Jeremy Corbyn. So can you imagine a parliament where you had people that actually spoke out, that were not scared of the whip? And it makes me laugh beyond belief when we hear Starmer saying, we put country before party. When every single time we see, they're so afraid to breach the whip. They will not go against the whip. Gareth will always put the party before his constituents. He's done it on Iraq, on every single thing since. And remember the expenses scandal. I give you Gareth.
Thank you. Abbas? Abbas and then Gareth. Please go ahead.
Look, firstly, I just want to say thank you to everyone for your questions. Thanks for SICM for having me. It's been a real privilege. I think you heard a lot from me today. A lot of you know me already from some time, many for decades. I genuinely am a community person. I do care deeply. I do care deeply for the issues that we've been discussing tonight. You have seen in my, and I've been referred to as a politician all night. I have to say I'm not a career politician. I'm a business finance guy who's come into politics in the last 2 years because I really want to give back. I want to represent and I want to make a difference to the wider community. And here, Harrow is what made me when I came here 30 years ago. I've got a really opportunity to work with the Conservative administration. That is really unique in delivering and local issues, not just for this community, but across all the beautiful, diverse communities of Harrow. I will stand against my party. I have demonstrated that already, even though I'm not even a member of parliament. Have faith, mate. This is a unique opportunity. Yes, you may not be in favour of my party, some of you may be, but unique opportunity, a unique opportunity to get someone in Parliament. There's a clear choice here. We all heard your views on Gareth. 27 years you had him. It is you who've been voting him in. You that supported him for 27 years. We've heard it clear today what your thoughts are about him. Pamela, I applaud you for all the things you have been doing and the work you've been doing on the Gaza. I really do applaud you. And if I get the opportunity, we may not agree on a lot of our policies, but I will work with you because your heart is in the right place. I will work with you.
Oh my goodness, misogyny rules, doesn't it?
No. Let me finish. Let me finish. There's a clear choice, and whatever you've been told by independents, we've got all the data from the recent elections. It's going to be very tight between the Conservatives and the Labour. Every single vote that goes to any other party apart from me means you got him for the next 5 years. That's absolutely clear. We've got all the data. Please do the right choice. It might be difficult. Your hands might shake, some of you, but do the right thing and give me that unique opportunity to represent you in Parliament for the next 5 years.
Thank you, Abbas. And Gareth, please go ahead.
Migdad, thanks very much, and thanks to everybody who's taken part in the hustings this evening, and to you as well for the job you've done in chairing the hustings. Just a month or so ago, the mayoral elections took place across London. Here in Harrow, Labour lost those elections, and if only Harrow had been voting, Sadiq Khan wouldn't be mayor of London. 2 years ago, there were many reasons why Labour lost control of Harrow Council, but one of them was because in a number of wards, people believed that they could vote for an independent, or they could vote Green or Liberal Democrat, but that Labour would still be in control of their council. So there is a very clear choice on July the 4th. We will wake up either with a Conservative government led by Rishi Sunak, with Bob Blackman and Liz Truss back in Parliament, or we can vote for a different way, a different direction for our country going forward, one that delivers more investment in the NHS, more investment in our schools, and begins to tackle the cost of living crisis. So I recognise that there may be many who are tempted to vote Independent or Liberal Democrat or Green, but the reality is it is a straight choice in Harrow between a Conservative MP or a Labour MP, and I hope people will make a positive voice for change and will vote Labour. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much for everyone for joining. Thank you to the candidates for gracing us with your presence and sharing your perspectives. Thank you to the audience for sharing your views. Thank you. Thank you to all of the audience. And
if it wasn't for you, then we wouldn't be able to have these questions here today. So it's really important always to hold our politicians to account, give the opportunity for them to share their perspectives so you can hear and you can decide what you're going to vote for. We do have to end here, and I apologize again if I haven't been able to get everyone in the audience, and I know I tried but wasn't able to. We do have to end because it's Maghrib time, it's time for prayers. So thank you very much, and hope you have a good evening.